Hello and welcome to this Business Day Focus 4.0 digital dialogue in partnership with BCX Johannesburg Business School and the Small Enterprise Development Agency, SEDA, as well. I'm Alicia Seckham. Now, there's no denying that pandemic-induced lockdowns accelerated the growth of digitalisation, really transforming the way organisations and their workforces operate. It's a shift that could see existing jobs disappear, others grow, and new job roles that don't already exist emerge. And this future workplace will demand new skills. Already, the demand for digital skills is at an all-time high, but the supply of digitally skilled workers sits well below what's needed. So, how do we then ride the wave of the fourth industrial revolution successfully? The long and short of it is, upskill fast. Organizations, business leaders and educators need to be proactive in upskilling and retraining workforces within the new landscape. So today, we put the spotlight on the current workforce and skills landscape and tackle head-on how we start to bridge the gap that exists between that and the workforce of the future. But before we delve into any potential strategy, a reminder to those of you watching, get involved in the conversation, share any questions you might have in the live chat, and we'll weave them in a little later on in the session. Because with me at the desk today is Chief Human Resource Officer at BCX, Hope Lukoto. Hope has a focus on strategically improving engagement levels in organizations and in coaching leaders through the change journey in preparation of the workforce for the future. And Tumi Nkosi as well, who's Director of the Executive Education Unit at Johannesburg Business School. Tumi's designed, managed and delivered executive education programs for blue chip companies across various sectors. Over and above that, she's a software engineer that's been involved in product and business development and project and program management as well. And then joining us online was supposed to have been Executive Manager of the Enterprise Development Division at SEDA, Ntokozo Majola. She's been roped into a morning meeting, and so taking her place from SEDA as well is Andrew Bam. He's Senior Manager of PAD and Learning over at SEDA. So welcome to you all, and thanks so much for being with us this morning. Andrew, given that you've willingly accepted the baton this morning, I'm going to kick the conversation off with you right now. Let's, right at the top, headline a cost, right? How much is the digital skills gap and the skills deficit in the country costing the South African economy?
Thank you, Alicia. And to put a firm figure on it, I think is almost impossible. But maybe from a SEDA perspective, I will talk from the entrepreneurship small business space and the sort of opportunity cost that you are looking at. So I think there's two legs to it. One is the lack of opportunities that are taken through, as you mentioned now, people unable to potentially code, start new businesses in that space, looking in large corporates, be able to compete effectively internationally and globally, and those opportunity costs. The second one is in terms of, and you're not talking for those technical skills, but people's ability to actually engage in the digital format or in the metaverse or whatever you want to call it, and the ability to actually utilize digital services. So a lot of what we do as well focuses on township and rural areas. And you find it's very difficult now to start leveraging some of the technology in the South African context because people are unable to engage effectively on that. And what this means is you're tending to find, first of all, I suppose, a lower competitiveness rating compared to maybe countries globally that have really adopted a very, very strong approach to digitalizing their workforce. At the same time, you're finding that just from a running everyday perspective and a maintenance perspective, we cannot take advantage of those opportunities to create those efficiencies locally. So I think across the board, it's costing us a lot and into the future. But again, it isn't an insurmountable obstacle. It's one that just takes a slightly different change of viewpoint and approach to see the opportunities that it presents us. And how do we now leverage on where we are at the moment and the skills that we've got to actually take advantage of those opportunities?
To me,
So I know I didn't answer your question, but I hope it's sufficient.
but well recognize that it is, very difficult to distill to me, given all the other economic headwinds that the South African economy comes up against, right? And we've got the energy crisis and that deficit to contend with standing front and center. What sense are you making of how much the skills deficit is actually hampering South Africa's then growth potential?
So if you look at the World Economic Forum's Reskilling Revolution initiative, it states that we need to upskill 1 billion people by 2030. And we're talking about people that are currently working. Now, if you look at South Africa with our unemployment issue where people can't get jobs because the economy is growing too slow, you can see that we are headed for a potentially larger crisis. If you're going to put unemployability on top of that, and that is the current workforce that can no longer find work because the skills that they have become obsolete because of digital transformation, then you can already see that by 2030, if there isn't an urgency from government, academia, as well as private business to work together so that we can also reskill at a rapid rate, then we're going to be looking at two big issues: unemployment as well as unemployability. So it's difficult. I would agree with my colleague from CEDA to put a price on it, but you can already see with the scourge of unemployment that we're seeing that if we add to that, there's going to be widespread displacement.
But Hope, we've had commentary doing the rounds that the pandemic has proved to be somewhat of an inflection point, re-engineering the future of work, reassessing the skills gap, redesigning an inclusive post-pandemic economic recovery. Has South Africa gotten the wake-up call to the drivers of change and transformation?
I think we are in the midst because we've had to deal with the pandemic. We've had to adopt hybrid, but we are not at that pace. And if you look now, we are kind of questioning, do we still go hybrid or do we go back to the office? And that goes with digital transformation. If we don't accelerate at the same pace, we won't be able to afford and maintain the hybrid workforce model. Technology is in innovation and disruption. It's happening at such a rapid pace that we don't have enough time, enough resources, and enough skills to keep up. But we gotta start and continue with it.
So let's start with the starting point, to me, because one assumes that it starts with a shift in curriculum, first and foremost, whether you're looking at primary, secondary, or tertiary school levels, right, to address the mismatch that we're seeing between academia and the kind of skills that the workplace now demands.
Absolutely. Look, it's very encouraging to see that the Department of Basic Education has started implementing skills that we define as skills of the future, things like artificial intelligence, Internet of Things, blockchain, that sort of curriculum at primary as well as high school. At tertiary level, there's also really encouraging green shoots. For example, at the University of Johannesburg, we had to rapidly implement a master's in artificial intelligence as an example. From a business school perspective, now things there are a bit more agile because we can move very quickly when we consult with private business so that we can determine what are the skills that they want yesterday so that we can implement them this morning, and then the delegates that have gone through them can start working on them this afternoon. So it is encouraging. I do believe, though, that there is plenty of room for change.
Okay.
You know, if I add to what Dumi is saying, you got to do all of this in tandem. It's primary, secondary, tertiary, and in corporate as well. The fact that you are employed doesn't mean you've got the skills of the future. Your skills might be becoming obsolete. So the resources and the time is going through the full spectrum. And again, we can't upskill people quick enough because as we are upskilling, the innovation and the disruption is also accelerating.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you can't ignore the deficits that sit in that arena when you're looking at even the unemployment rate of graduates. I mean, sitting within the 25 to 34-year-old category, that's sitting at 22%. Unemployment amongst graduates in the 15 to 24-year category is at 32.6% as well. So, to me, before I let you go and move on back to Andrew, what does educating and reskilling in the future look like here? And let's factor in the trickiness of having to equip learners in some instances for jobs that don't already exist.
Absolutely. I think for the Johannesburg Business School, what we've seen on the ground is that the traditional one-size-fits-all approach to teaching, learning, as well as reskilling doesn't work, because what looks like a digital transformed skill set for Hope will look absolutely different to what a digitally transformed skill set for me is. Even if we're working in the same department, same jobs, we have to look at what your talents are, what are your current skill set, and what does it look like projecting into the future. So the type of education that needs to happen is much more customized. And that's why at Johannesburg Business School, we also emphasize executive coaching, so that when you access, for example, digital marketing as a course and you're a marketer, the coach then helps you define what it looks like within your specific context. Because what will work, for example, in a government department is completely different to what will work at a corporate company. So that we try to make sense of it all by implementing micro-learning and then pairing that with executive coaching, so that the lessons can be implemented while you are considering the context within which the learner is working under.
Andrew, under this banner then of customization of, the package that you put forward to the learners and in the education space, is there enough of an understanding out there on the skills that are needed in the first place? And does it need to be considered that perhaps, more or some skills are more or less relevant in South Africa, or Africa for that matter, than they would be in other territories?
Thank you, Alicia. I think, so the first part of your question, no, I don't think there's a proper comprehension in terms of where the skills gap is. I think there's an outsized focus purely on the technical skills. So where people, especially when they talk about 4IR, they talk about the coding skills and the augmented reality skills and blockchain skills, etc., big data and analysis skills. And that's fine. The technical skills are a critical component. But there are a lot more skills that are required in moving into this new world, because it's not just that industry has changed, but the way that business is conducted has changed. So you're able to start many more smaller businesses much more quickly and get a global market based in South Africa. So the skills will be the same here to be competitive over there or anywhere. We're in a wonderful time zone, a lot of opportunities. But what you have to address over and above just the technical skills deficit are things like the business management skills, the entrepreneurial skills, the interpersonal skills, the behavioral and motivational skills that people have. So and all of these sorts of components. So things like problem solving or critical thinking ability. And I think that is where we tend to really fall down quite a lot, because we've still got the sort of framework mindset where learners go into school and they get knowledge. So you'll get knowledge about a subject, bar one or two where you learn a basic skill, but you get knowledge about it, and then you expect it to go and apply it.
Yeah.
And that's not the way the world works now. You need to be able to go out and problem solve and be able to engage with issues and interpersonal skills with other people and understand where they come from. So I think if you take a broad look at the broad basket of skills and then try and address it from that point of view, you'll be far more effective. But it does mean trying to tweak the entire way we understand learning as a concept, so almost moving away from the sort of unit standards approach to something that really is about tangible outcomes at the end of the day that really gear people to be engaged, to be able to engage in a value-adding way in this modern post-industrial society.
Hope, let's get your perspective, because you're part of industry here. What skills do you believe are essential for the new work landscape?
To Andrew's point, I think we need to shift our mindset into whatever qualification you have is giving you the foundation to think broadly, to problem solve. Then you got to use that as a stepping stone into other disciplines. Now we're looking for data science in marketing, in HR, in finance. It's not just a technical skill. I like where we're going, where we're now combining the left brain and the right brain. We're looking for creativity, we're looking for imagination, we're looking for culture curators. Because when we look at automation, machine learning, and robotics, what they cannot replicate is those interpersonal skills. They cannot replicate human nature and humanness. So connectedness is what we're going to continue to demand going forward. The other day, I read an article that was indicating that social work might become a very cool profession in the future, because you need to navigate relationships. And as you're managing technology and humans working together, what you're going to need more is those connectedness skills.
It's so important what you're highlighting right now, Hope, because while I was doing some reading for this session specifically, I came across this 2021 report written by Boston Consulting Group saying that 53% of South Africans are worried that automation is going to threaten their job security. 46% of global workers in their 20s and 41% in their 30s view automation with the most skepticism. So we need to start shifting the perception of what AI actually means, right? That it's not a threat and it doesn't enhance job security.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, it's an opportunity. Where we were doing a lot of repetitive and mundane type of work, which really is not meaningful. It doesn't give you job satisfaction. You now are going to think complex problem solving, design thinking, because you must still design something for your client or to solve a particular problem in the community. Robotics is not going to do that. It's going to give you the tools and the resources to deliver it effectively, efficiently, and to be able to scale.
It's all about equipping and becoming better equipped to meet the changing demands of the workplace, right? Tumi, you alluded to a short while ago the shift that we're seeing in curriculum being brought to the fore by the Department of Education. We've had the Minister of Education, Angie Motshekga, looking at specialist subject curriculum, and part of it is incorporating entrepreneurial and IT skills. We're looking at civil technology, digital technology, electrical technology, mechanical technology. I mean, it all sounds like a step in the right direction. You mentioned that it's a step in the right direction, but I've got to ask, what's the reading on your confidence barometer when it comes to delivering this mandate, delivering real, tangible outcomes?
The one way that we have seen that the best approach works is if you make it make sense for the people that are being faced with these technologies and the sense of stress that it might displace them. So because what we have noticed is that a lot of people speak about artificial intelligence, automation, as if it's this pie in the sky, and they struggle to make sense as if to make sense insofar as what does automation mean for me personally and my skill set. So when you start translating to say it's not that your skill set are going to be displaced, this is how you can rejig your skills so that you can continue to be productive while working together with these technologies, then you start having inclusive conversations. So until such a time that we can bring the workforce with us as we're talking about digital transformation and go to the grassroots and explain what does artificial intelligence mean for me as a marketer? What does automation for me as a factory worker? And how am I going to withstand this change in a way that's not going to impact my livelihood? Then we can start make meaningful change. For now, it seems as if these technologies are pies in the sky, and the people that should be engaging with them a bit more meaningfully do not find ways of doing so.
It's because, though, we come up, Hope, against a very big but. Unequal access to resources.
Absolutely.
And this puts significant challenge on the table. It's a significant hurdle that needs to be cleared here. Is South Africa, African infrastructure for that matter, geared to accommodate, this digital tool set to drive transformation between now and 2030?
Not enough. Not enough. I mean, we've seen that with the pandemic. The children that continued with their education are the ones that had the resources. The ones that didn't, they've taken a step back. We really need to get to a point where we have ubiquitous access to technology and data and so forth. And the more you get everyone to play around with technology, the more you get the minds that are thinking, that are being creative. The youth that are unemployed, they can solve community problems within their communities if they have access.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Andrew, I'm going to bring you in at this point. Is it a hard sell? And I always ask this question, given the socio-economic context that we operate in at the end of the day, that we cannot ignore here. We aren't meeting basic needs, food, shelter, access to health resources as well. Like I say, I ask this question all the time. Is it a hard sell, trying to get budget and investment directed to this space?
To the space of skills development.
And resources more so that will work to enhance that skills development as we progress.
I think at the moment it really is, Alicia. And to put it into context, I think we've got so many burning crises in the country. If you think of ESCOM, if you think of state of the SOEs, if you think of the overhaul that governance needs in the country, etc., what's happening in the SAPs. And you've got a limited, we've got a decent budget. We get enough in from SARS every year to actually cater for our needs. But there's so many urgent things that need to be fixed that those longer term, more strategic things positioning us for 5 years, 10 years from now often get neglected while you take care of your left foot that's on fire. So it is a hard sell. I think the need is recognized, and the fact that the transition has to take place, but it does require a really strategic process that ensures that budget over the medium to longer term, and that it is put in there, and that it is done in a strategic way that is outcomes based. So it's not just going to be interventions. It's not going to be a bunch of coding courses that are run out or X, Y, and Z, but it's actually a holistic approach and a whole of society approach to this, that you can address from the demand side right through to the supply side, and that you can actually really create that fourth industrial economy that we talk about a lot and we do think about it a lot, but structurally we're not quite there at the moment.
Absolutely.
You do have pockets that do spring up, but you need to address everything from infrastructure to the skills gap, to the market demand side, to the access to these things. So, and it's just like a quick one. Because of our data is so expensive, the ability for people, the barriers to entry to then engage with digital services is massively reduced. So that entire potential side of the market, and that whole part of the economy, is massively reduced in terms of its total potential size. So you need to address those things. So it's not one thing that needs to be fixed. It's a bunch of elements across. And until you take that strategic approach to the entire thing, and then you ensure there's budget to address every single one of those elements and that they are properly program managed in implementation, I think you're kind of just fiddling around the edges, and you're not really going to get to the meat of the issue.
Because it's hard enough to me, tackling some of these social inequalities that do persist, even when we do have access to resources. So at a tertiary level, even when resources or courses are available, we've got experts estimating that at best, coursework lags what's required from the workforce by about 2 years. That is significant. What redressal mechanisms could we potentially be exploring here? Surely this is where organizations need to start getting more involved.
Absolutely, I agree with you. And I think this is where the challenge and opportunity is for areas within higher education, such as executive education, because those are the units within the university that are challenged to go and have closer relationships with industry itself. Because once the industry is able to identify what are the skills that they want, academia is supposed to step in to create those skills so that they can then quickly be implemented within industry. I still say that there is a weak relationship, if I may call it that, when it comes to reskilling, particularly for the current workforce, between government, academia, and the private sector. It is not just academia's job. It is not just the private sector's job. It is not just government's job. When you look at how the World Economic Forum reskilling agenda works, all three of these spheres are working quite tightly together to determine, number one, what are the skills that a specific country would want? Number two, what are we going to do today to make sure that we meet these skills requirements in the next year or two, and how do them implement them at large scale on the ground? Yeah. So there needs to be tighter integration in order for the reskilling to work properly.
So on the back of what Tumi's then just said, Hope, let's take a look at how collaborative BCX is being amidst all of this, right? Or what's the upskilling process looking like within your organization, and how do you see that effectively filtering through to the world of work in general?
We actually partnering right from grassroots to our own employees, so that we create that pipeline and we create a pool where we can recruit from. So we've partnered with Within Code, the Data Science Academy, Girl Code. We are at high schools also teaching them and showing them technology, because at high school level you also want to aspire to, you want to see that it's relevant. I can see that I can go and do this thing. And therefore, when you bring the people closer, you bring technology closer, you start partnering with the schools to do the same. So to me, it's very right. We got to partner with tertiary educations. We had partnered with a couple of them for our own employees on the digital side, where we're running digital programs for our own employees. But we can still do much more. We know what is changing in terms of the job and the delivery, the output that we want. So we can really direct it much better. But there's all of those programs that we are currently running to ensure that we upskill the youth and that we create a talent pipeline to come to corporate.
As far as definitions of what digitally skilled means, we have a viewer comment come through. How are digital skills defined? Is a toddler familiar with operating a smartphone considered digitally skilled?
Absolutely, it is. You know,
That's where it starts.
Yes. And I think also we got to move away from terms, and even with jobs, we got to move away from the definitions that we have given to a job and a role, to expand and allow new innovation and disruptions to come into play. When we box each other and we have a narrow view, that's when we kind of think, no, because you just you're using a smartphone, you're not digitally savvy. You are digitally savvy.
Okay. To an extent, it does need further development,
Yeah.
further building on, further growth as well. Andrew, for those organizations that don't get it just yet, why should organizations invest in human capital through training and retention?
I don't know if there's any organizations that don't really get it. But at the end of the day, a business is based on value and people create value. So between other people. So if you want to grow a business, or if you want your business to be sustainable, it requires people to engage and people to create value for one another. Otherwise, there is no business at the end of the day. So by investing in your human capital, you obviously, it's in the best interests of your business. I know there is not controversy around it in South Africa, but I suppose some headwinds on that, because there are additional risks in South Africa when it comes to, you know, your human capital and your workforce and all of that. So people can be quite reticent to do that, and a lot of it is prescribed in certain frameworks. But I think it's nonsensical to capacitate your workforce to take advantage of where the world is going.
Yeah.
Because, you know, if you look where South Africa is now, or the world is now, and the economy is now compared to pre-COVID, look at the changes that's happened in those 2.5 years. You know, remote working, everybody's on Zoom, everybody's doing these things. They're buying their stuff online. And that's happened in 2 years. What's going to happen in the next 2 years and the 2 years after that? So it's going to be rapidly changing, and you need to try and stay ahead of that curve, or your business will die.
Absolutely. There's tangible commercial value that skilled personnel deliver, right, to businesses. Is BCX Hope coming up against a very short skills pipeline where access to the right skills is proving to be prohibitive for your business right now?
Absolutely. We are seeing that challenge. The war for talent has just moved from being local to global. With remote work, skilled people, they have a choice now. They can work for whoever, they can work for global organizations sitting here in South Africa. So we really are up against a very small pool that we all want to recruit from. And to the tune of, are we upskilling our people? If you don't upskill, the skilled, the small pool of skilled resources will work for somebody else. They won't work for you if you don't have the technology that is advancing your organization.
Yeah.
And if you don't have a digital program, you are working yourself out of a business, because we are moving towards a digital economy. We have to gear everything up to be able to respond to it. As BCX, if we are going to be a thought leader in our industry and advise other organizations on digital transformation, we better make sure that we are ahead of the curve. All our employees are ahead of the curve.
When it comes to quantum, can you put a number to it? How much investment is BCX actually directing this way?
It's not easy to put a number on it, because I don't think there's enough resources and time for an employee to unlearn and pick up a new skill while they're running the old skill parallel, while we are transforming the organization as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Andrew, let's bring it back to you for a minute here in, the smaller enterprise space as a whole. What role does CEDA play in unearthing innovation and enterprise development? Because the digitalization agenda is a government imperative right now, and that's something that you very forcefully speak to. And I'm going to rope in, sorry for the long-windedness of this, but a viewer question that's come through as well. I'd like to know, how are you guys going to assist rural areas as we experience network crises in our rural areas. I'm from the Northwest with lots of rural tourism opportunities. So I'd like to ask if SEDA can assist SMMEs with post-COVID-19 recovery plans. And I'm referring to most of SMMEs experience deregistration due to the lack of annual returns and budget to pay accountants, for example. Is there any means that SEDA has to allocate budget to bring back closed business through assisting them?
Okay, so maybe to start answering with that question first, and just that we understand what SEDA's mandate is. Because if I read the question correctly, it's talking about the financial issues and obviously trying to get the finances back in. So SEDA as an agency has a mandate for non-financial support. It's a very broad mandate, and it covers everything from export development to entrepreneurship awareness, et cetera, but it's strictly on non-financial support. The Small Enterprise Financing Agency, which is our partner organization, our sister organization, their mandate is now the financial support, and they have got they do have funds that they do look at in doing that. Having said that, we are doing a lot of work on assisting businesses to get going again, doing a lot of work around the flood relief and those that were affected by the floods, the post-riot relief, so those that were affected by the riots, and trying to get those ones, keep them sustainable and get them moving forwards again on that side. So I think the short answer, from a financial perspective, we're not allowed to, but in terms of the non-financial support, in terms of getting them going, getting them access to markets, plugging them into various new technologies, etc., that is there, and we are rolling that out quite broadly. Again, the other thing that he does acknowledge, and I can talk to that, where there are these infrastructure constraints. Again, infrastructure, unfortunately, we can't resolve. But there are places in the Northern Cape, Northwest, Mpumalanga, rural KZN, where trying to get digital technology in there is just impossible. So we're trying to roll out a couple of learning apps that really are highly scalable and have, a lot of AI enabled in that into these regions. But because you don't have connectivity and data, you now have to look for workarounds. So now it means download it somewhere else so that you can work remotely and offline, and then log in again when you need to get the next one done, and set up hotspots to be able to do that. But I think the last point I would like to make on this, and it really is very true, and in South Africa more than most, especially in the current context, but that is that attitude is everything, especially for the individuals. And I know the gist of the conversation is what's corporates doing, what's government doing, but there is also an onus on the individuals, where you need to create a learning environment and a learning attitude, because you've got online these MOOCs, these massive open source online courses. You've got all of this, all the information is there at your fingertips that you need to be able to take. But a lot of people don't do it, and they want to get a bursary and go to do a tertiary qualification. But the information is there, and you can do it on your own time without it costing the business anything. So it's businesses to create the space for people and encouragement for people to be able to do these things. But the initiative resides with the individual to go out there and learn. These skills are there. They're free apps that you can do it to learn, teach yourself coding at 90. Take advantage of these opportunities, because I don't think it's the responsibility just resides with, institutional South Africa, but also at the individual level.
On that note, Andrew, to what extent do parents influence skill development amongst children? Are children whose parents are involved in technological industries better equipped to seize those opportunities?
I think that can't be overstated enough. And I think that talks to some of the issues around transformation, around where we are going. If you've got parents that aren't, and I look obviously mostly from an entrepreneurial perspective, but we do talk about obviously the 4IR and that, and through our incubators and that. But people who aren't exposed to it from a young age have a massive gap to try and catch up, and they're always behind on that. And what happens then, once you're behind on something as a person, you tend to lose confidence in your ability there, so you cease to try, and then you don't ever get on that track. So there's a lot to be done in encouraging people, providing them with the opportunities, but to say it's never too late to start. Just because your peers maybe at your age have gone down that track you can still start now and catch them, because there are so many opportunities here. But people just need to see them and not be too intimidated because it sounds scary and they weren't exposed from it.
And I guess that most significant to me right now, where we've had COVID, certainly, expand that gap between the haves and the have-nots, the digital skills gap more so. Are you encouraged by the kind of skilling and reskilling initiatives that are in play? Because you highlighted right at the top the World Economic Forum Skills Revolution 2030, which aims to then, avoid skills displacement by reskilling 1 billion people by 2030. Is what's being done in your books enough to avoid that skills displacement in South Africa, or Africa for that matter, by 2030? Or is Africa still very much at risk of being left behind?
I'm very encouraged. If you look at the investment side of things, I mean, universities, including faculties such as the Johannesburg Business School, together in 2019 collected revenues of just below 28 billion rand for reskilling and upskilling. That's in total tuition fees. So from an investment perspective, we seem to be seeing a growth in investment. And from 2019, that figure has gone up. The question is, are we focusing this investment on the right skills? And I also want to caution all of us to not focus too much on technological skills. They are important, but they're not the only thing. So you need to look at contextual intelligence, which includes all those technologies. Obviously, we need to be aware of what is going on there. But there's also another thing that we need to consider, and that is the issue of employee well-being. Did you know that Deloitte recently reported that up to 77% of the US workforce experienced burnout during the lockdown? So we got the digital skills that they say that we should have, but did we build in the human skills that go with those digital skills? And from a contextual intelligence perspective, the other area that we need to focus on, given the investment that we have, are these leadership and human skills. Things like resilience, things like how to lead with empathy, how to have digital presence. The fact that you're away doesn't mean that you should keep quiet and your boss doesn't know where you are. What type of boss do you have? Does she want or he want you to keep in contact? How many times? Those sort of things that will also then try and alleviate this unforeseen effect of burnout as a result of perhaps maybe too much emphasis on the digitization of skills. So I am encouraged, but I would like to see some numbers that tell us that for the investment that we're getting, we are focusing that investment on the right skills.
I suppose the downside is the always on pandemic.
Yes.
Absolutely. But it's where contextualization matters. And that's very important to me, what you've highlighted there, Hope. So let's bring in this question from a viewer this morning. How can one go about having your organization actually visiting our schools to sell the idea of 4IR to the pupils? We have already started collaborating with other digital companies and organizations to advocate for digital literacy to our youth. And we hear this on repeat, right? Collaboration, collaboration, collaboration. ICT sector needs to start doing more. What's the next step for you as an organization in the broader ambit?
Obviously, we have identified certain communities that we operate from, where we then get involved. We're not going to get involved throughout South Africa. We also have the Telkom Foundation that also does more scale. But if that caller is talking more directly about a school that they would like to highlight, I'm happy for them to contact BCX and we'll see what we can do.
How do they engage? I mean, are doors open? Is it free engagement?
Technology is open. Technology is open. You can find us on our website, and through our website you'll find really a lot of information to the services and products that we offer, to the foundations that we run and the other projects within Code Data Science Academy that we run, and careers that we offer within BCX. So that would be a good way to start. But within the context of where we operate, the certain communities that we have identified, and in the broader Telkom group, there's the same.
Let's explore engagement a little further for a minute here, right? Are you, as private sector, engaging with tertiary educations via graduate programs? I mean, it's hardly a new concept, but it's one that needs emphasizing and emphasizing again.
Yeah, on two fronts, actually. We are focusing on skills. Let's partner on the skills that we can bring digital transformation and research. Let's partner on doing research. We also enable people to come and do research within our organizations because we have the solutions and the products. We also partnering with academia on the side of we would like to pilot certain solutions and services that we then take to market.
Okay.
So research is becoming very important for both corporates and academia. And I think it's a very nice, it's a sweet spot for us to find one another.
Tumi, you wanted to add something?
I absolutely do. You know, when I was in my teens, the first job that I had as a junior software engineer was as a result of an apprenticeship program where this company that I was working for went to the university where I was at to look for first-year students that have completed a coding language. It wasn't the coding language that they were looking for, but they were willing to take those people, put them through an apprenticeship program, and then hire them. I'm wondering if there's still space for us to do that, because apprenticeship seems to be working really well.
Do you engage with the YES program?
We do. And I'll speak on that. I'm glad you mentioned that because I was going to speak on it. So in Germany, they use apprenticeship quite a lot. And the youth unemployment rate there, I believe, is quite low. Switzerland is another one that focuses on the tourism market that's also doing very well with apprenticeship program. We do work with YES program. And what I have seen is that usually you would have these young people come in and there isn't a definitive plan as to how are you going to not only reskill them so that they're ready for work, but reskill them so that they are digitally ready to work in this particular environment. And there's an opportunity there. So the challenge there is on the managers of these young people to have a plan, a digital plan to say, I'm going to teach you X, Y, Z, because that is the skills that we're looking for in South Africa from a digital transformation perspective. This is how I'm going to measure you. By the time that you leave, you should be able to do X, Y, Z. Instead of bringing them in and all they do is tea and coffee, which is what I have seen on the ground.
But it also, to me, speaks to effort actually being put into creating very specific pathways into the tech arena, you know, things like fintech at a graduate level. So centers of excellence actually creating these pathways that present South Africa's youth with a career path that's based on ICT skills, right?
Yeah, and there's many opportunities. There's clean tech, there's femtech, there's health tech, there's fintech. There's so many pathways to it. You don't just need people with a computer science degree. Social workers, when you said that, my mother's probably jumping up and down. She's happy that you're talking about her particular profession. But if we can be creative about how we look at these specific skills and digitize them, if I may call it that, so that those that are in the healthcare center can still be plugged into the healthcare center, but put an overlay of technology on it, then you've got a digitally transformed skill set. So we need to be creative about how we put these pathways together, but the opportunities are many.
And you know what? We have a responsibility. As corporates, we have a responsibility to really upskill the youth and give them the resources to fly. It doesn't always translate into we will employ them permanently because we are looking at scale. But once we've given you the skill and we have exposed you to our customer network, you can find a job with the customer or elsewhere.
And that's what any business needs at the end of the day, a sustainable growing economy in order for itself to survive at the end of the day. Andrew, one of the questions that we had this morning was, you know, who takes the lead on the skilling revolution? Is it private business? Is it government? Is it academia? And I think we've answered that question quite comprehensively, that it is a collaborative approach that needs to be adopted here. But what kind of partnerships does the country require, do you think, in order to catch up to international standards?
So that's kind of a tricky one. But I think in terms of, so let me break it down into those component parts. So you spoke about government. Who should government be partnering with to try and do that? And obviously, okay, there are the tertiary institutions which are partially government owned, etc., but the private ones, international ones, and there's online MOOCs to bring those skills in here. They need to partner with corporates. So you've got Amazon moving in, we've got Google, AWS. You've got all of these big organizations moving in that require these skills. They've got budget to spend. We've got the frameworks through BBBE where they do equity offsets from that to utilize for skilling. So you get the budget there, you've got the demand. Now we need to get the supply. And then you need to obviously work with the communities as a whole. So it's an awareness, it's an advocacy thing of selling this as a concept. Don't be scared. Look at the opportunities. And as you mentioned, create a framework. Here's a place where you can go to get your information. Keep it simple, because I think where a lot of things go wrong is there's so much information out there and all of that. Where do I start? I want to join 4R. Where do I start? What do I do? What's my first step? And that's often where the biggest barrier to entry is, just getting on that first rung of the ladder. Once they're there, then it becomes clear as you pick up the skills. And then I think from business perspective is to really understand that it's all good and well doing uniform trainings, but be strategic in the approach, and be strategic from an economic perspective of what's going to be good for the country, and how do we really develop an entire cohort. And especially if you look at that youth unemployment rate, how do we really invest with them as a whole of, a whole of society, and really focus our skills development on those learners, so that we really create this pipeline of really good potential for our employees, entrepreneurs, business owners that can do that. And I think then the last one is just saying, we exist in a global economy, and there's a massive demand for these skills all around the world. So we need to keep South Africa attractive for these people. Otherwise, they get the skills here, we get the pipeline, but we're losing them as quickly as we're retaining them, because they want to go somewhere else in the world, and they can move. So we need to keep South Africa attractive for these people to stay here and be able to pass their knowledge on.
Yeah. And, if we have time, we're going to be delving into that a bit more. But a very direct question, Andrew, that has come through this morning is, what's the best way to start a business in a digital skills environment? And what are the current constraints and limitations to doing so?
Sure. Well, there's a million different answers to that question. It depends on who the person is, what their skill level is, what their passions are, what the opportunity is. But I think the same holds true for digital economy versus normal economy. If you're going to start at the beginning, identify a problem. What is the problem, a real world problem that you're trying to solve? Don't just start a digital business because of 4R. What is the problem you're trying to solve? Then you'll have a digital solution to that, either through bringing it together multiple databases, through big data, or through a clever bit of coding, because that's your skill set. And then you sell that problem, and you can then sell it either in the real world or online or both. But it starts there. Identify the problem, and then the technology will enable you to help solve that problem. But that's where it starts, because even though we are living in a 4R world, it's still human problems that we solve. It's not other things. It's human problems. It's people at the end of the day that you're going to be serving, and you need to keep the focus there. So and it's my opinion. I'm not. I'm speaking a thingy here, but the place to start is actually just identify that problem.
To me,
don't get too caught up in I need to go to have a digital business.
Absolutely, you've got to keep that in mind, right? To me, especially where we're looking at the forging of dynamic partnerships here to create an ecosystem of solutions, a collaborative ecosystem here. I've got to ask you though, and I know I run the risk of taking this conversation a step back, but tech tools and in-house training aside, development programs aside, do we need to throw more policy response into the equation to force this agenda?
I think, as I had mentioned, the apprentice program, I'm wondering if there is any reward from a policy perspective that will drive government as well as private sector to put those types of programs in place. I believe if there's policy that rewards such interventions, then a lot more people will want to start implementing those programs. But I don't want to just look at just policy to say, if policy doesn't allow us, then things cannot happen. There's still specific action areas that both academia as well as private business can start implementing, and perhaps maybe go to policy and government to say, this is what we would like from a policy perspective, can you please support us? So it's not always going to be used that whoever it is that has got the resources, the knowledge, the skill should implement some of these programs on the ground, so that the others then can see the sense in the madness, if I may call it that, and start putting in support. We don't have much time. The digital transformation from a skills perspective is driving the making our skills obsolete at a very rapid pace. So whoever it is that can start integrating some of these solutions on the ground need to do so, because there's great agency behind this.
Okay, so on the ground experiences, on the ground integration. Hope on that note, do you have support programs for organizations that's involved in supporting the identification and promotion of township and rural innovation? So you mentioned at the top that the areas you target very much dependent on scale. Is this something that you could possibly lend your muscle to?
We have an innovation program that we run for small businesses and entrepreneurs that we run on a yearly basis, where we support them with funding and we support them with a framework and a structure for them to enable those businesses to thrive. And some of them are mainstream businesses today. So it's important to look out for that as well, not only within BCX. I think there's a lot of organization that incubate ideas and help you bring them to life, which are focusing on using digital solutions to solve to solve community problems.
Yeah.
Yeah.
As we've been alluding to the run-up to this point now, this is all as we get or see the global fight for skills intensify, right? What's competition for skill looking like as far as you're concerned, bearing in mind that it's no longer necessarily a physical migration that needs to happen, that we are looking at a global talent pool that organizations can source from and can choose from virtually any sector, any country, any time or day.
It's fierce, eh? It's fierce. And the scary thing is we also have a lot of graduates that have degrees from reputable universities that we can't give employment to.
Yeah.
Maybe because the skill set is not what we are looking for, or that's going to take us to the future. So it's fierce. I think we also have to open ourselves up to recruiting from across borders to enable those skills.
I was just going to say, vice versa applies here. How much offshore skill
We're going to
is
have
South
to look
Africa
at that.
actually open to? And do you come up against quite a barrier when it comes to employing that skill?
Not exactly. I think people are interested. People are interested in solving complex problems and applying their expertise. The gig economy is something that we need to take advantage of and use open source to advertise and say we have a challenge. If you can lend your time, a month, 2 weeks, etc., to solve a particular problem, people that have skills are very keen to do things like those. It's fierce. As much as I'm saying that we need to open our borders, we also really need to ramp up upskilling our own people, because it's within that talent pool that you have internally that you need to retain that is going to move you forward. And if you don't have, they will leave you for the same reasons that you're not upskilling them.
Are companies then, to me, thinking as creatively as they should be beyond the traditional, thinking when it comes to just throwing higher salaries at people, when it comes to retaining? Because it's not just about gaining talent, it's about retaining talent at the end of the day.
I believe that we're starting to see good and strong attempts on the ground, because when you look at employee value proposition, there's so many factors now. One of the things that I picked up in a report that I recently read was the increase in the value of a company's ability to develop skill for employees is going much higher than just the money component. Another one, actually, I have a friend, yesterday we were just talking, and she told me that a senior director that she was trying to hire declined the job because they wouldn't offer flexible working. The money was good, development was there, but because they will have to come into the office every day, they declined that offer. So I think there's encouragement in that there's so many ways that you can attract and retain talent, not just money. If we are creative about all these elements that have become valuable to employees, then you start being able to create a package that will better retain the talent that you have. But I do agree with Hope, the fight for talent is fierce, number one. But I'm also encouraged because a lot of South African talent is being taken away. So somewhere we must be doing something right, because the likes of other countries are poaching our talent.
Absolutely. Andrew, I'm going to ask you a question. I don't know if you've got your crystal ball handy here, but what do you foresee being the top in-demand skills for the future?
Jeez. And when you say the future, I presume 5 years, 10 years from now?
Yeah, absolutely.
So there will be the technical ones, things like, big data and analytics and coding and all of that. But I think from a business perspective, it's going to be looking more on the soft side. So problem-solving ability. I think creativity is one that is really, really going to become more and more important, because you're finding those differences on that side. Critical thinking, the ability to, disaggregate all this nonsense and be able to reach the right conclusion and make a decision based on that, especially when you're looking at management level. And I think when you talk 4IR, you're talking all of these skills. We always, as I said at the beginning, focus on the technical element, but all of these come down there. And then the last one that I think is really going to be there is initiative or self-starter ability. So businesses, corporates, SMMEs, entrepreneurship, the economy is going to reward those people that are able to be self-starters and take an idea forward and make it happen, because the world is agile now. There isn't time for writing memos and it goes up and you get approved and all of that. It's about people taking the initiative, making a good decision and executing on that. And that's what's going to make us competitive going forward.
Yeah, especially when you are looking at a very fast-paced and evolving, evolving arena here. Hope we've had the combined forces of the fourth industrial revolution, of COVID-19 and the pandemic, see digitalisation take a massive step forward, right? Seeing a large-scale shift to remote working, to e-commerce. We've spoken about all of this as the conversation progressed. How much of this do you start seeing reverting as economies start to open up? You know, things like even hybrid solutions amongst organizations are being questioned now. Do you see some of that thrust starting to wane, or are we in a world of a new way of thinking?
Let's just look at the Great Resignation.
Yeah.
Employees are now voting with their feet. They've now reprioritized. They've thought very differently about their lives. Their lifestyle has changed. My priorities have changed. Most people don't want to go back to the office. And besides not going back to the office, I think it really gives us an opportunity to create new ways of working and new ways of being. We don't have to go back. Let's not waste a good crisis. Let's take advantage of digital transformation. Let's take advantage of a hybrid. Let's enforce those emerging technologies and use them to our advantage. Retail does that very well. They use big data to influence us and direct where we spend our money without us really even thinking twice. But it's our own data that they are using to drive that. We need to use the same to drive the future that we are moving towards. The days where we were all on the road going to the same destination at the same time, it's not effective use of time. So we can use all of the thrust to digital transformation to make us more effective, to scale, to make us more efficient, and to be able to do that balance that Tumi was talking about, where we allow people to work but still have a balance where well-being is a priority as well.
An interesting question that's popped through: is a lack of engagement on digital platforms a result of mistrust from 419 scams during the early days of the internet? We say early days, but they're progressing fast and steadily at the moment. If so, how can trust be developed so that individuals do feel safe to engage on digital platforms?
I think one of the things that is progressing very quickly as a skill and a function is cybersecurity, and using cybersecurity effectively to protect yourself and protect your employees is what we should be looking at. Because yes, there's a danger to being digital. People are worried about switching on their cameras, etc. But there's policies and processes that we can apply to cybersecurity to make sure that we protect our information, we protect data, and we protect people, especially young kids. Because the more they use it, you know, there's dangers out there in the dark web, and the more we can use technology to equip ourselves to protect the important things, it can be done.
So Tumi, last word to you then. If we do get our acts together, how quickly do you see addressing the skills shortage in this space, reducing South Africa's current unemployment or employment situation? Because we have to be cognizant of the fact that this isn't simply a switch that you flick.
We don't have much time. We cannot even say that, you know, it will be done, or if we get it together. We will have to get it together, because without the reskilling process that we need to put in place, we are not going to have much of a society. Can you imagine if we have a 34.5% current unemployment rate? Now, these people, as we reskill and we don't look at them, we are going to be putting them out of the employment pool forever and ever. And if we don't reskill the current workforce, the 65.5% that is remaining, those people are going to be adding to the 34.5%. If the July unrests from last year were perhaps maybe as a result of poverty, some people believe that it was not. But if there is unrest as a result of people not having jobs and things to do, can you imagine what will happen if the 65.5% is not reskilled and they start joining the 34.5%? 100%. You cannot imagine the type of suffering that we will be seeing. So number one, we do not have a choice whether or not we should get it together. We should get it together. We should get it together yesterday, and it doesn't matter who starts what. If you can make a difference, yes, program your own people that you need to lead in a specific way so that they build their digital skills. We need to start today to avoid the type of calamity that we're facing.
On that note, let's leave it there. Thank you all for having joined me in conversation today. It's been an absolute pleasure. Tumi, Hope, Andrew, thanks so much for having joined us online as well. That's Hope Lukoto, Tumi Nkosi, and Andrew Bam as well. It's been great, as I say, engaging with all of you this morning. Thanks so much for having joined us, sharing your perspectives with us and some of your ideas as well. To you, our viewers, thank you for joining and engaging with us. This conversation has been recorded, and the link will be shared in the thank you mailer, which will be sent after the event. So do keep an eye out for that. And of course, a special thank you to our partners, BCX, Johannesburg Business School, and the Small Enterprise Development Agency as well, for their involvement in what is a very important discussion right now. From me, Alicia Seckham, it's goodbye.